Brunswick County Board of Elections in 2006 as Deputy Director and was appointed Director in 2014, bringing deep institutional knowledge and a steady commitment to public service. With over 17 years in elections administration, LaVere is a certified North Carolina elections administrator and has held leadership roles in the North Carolina Association of Directors of Elections, including President from 2022 to 2023, Treasurer, and now serves as immediate past President. LaVere's work emphasizes integrity, voter education, and continuous improvement of election processes. Her contributions have been acknowledged through honors such as the North Carolina Dogwood Award, presented by Attorney General Josh Stein in 2021 for outstanding service to the state. Beyond her professional responsibilities, LaVere is active in her community. She volunteers with the Girl Scouts of North Carolina Coastal Pines and has served as a troop co-leader and media coordinator for the Brunswick County Service Unit. LaVere holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. She can put that to work. She lives in Leland, North Carolina, and continues to champion fair, efficient, and voter-focused election administration for one of the fastest growing counties in the state.
Yay, welcome, Sara.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
I may have been doing elections for 20 years, but let's just say I started when I was like 18. I don't know. 20 years sounds too, like I can't believe that sometimes, that I've been doing this for 20 years. I am very grateful for the opportunity to come speak with you all. I really enjoy helping the people that want to help the voters know how elections work, because if you are having a conversation with your neighbor or your friend or somebody on Facebook, having the right information, or even knowing that you could call me and I could give you the right information, I think that's so important, because there's always misinformation. There are always people moving from other locations. As one of the fastest growing counties in the nation, that is one of our biggest challenges. So I'm going to hopefully provide some of the general how do you vote in North Carolina information, and then I'll get into some of the weeds of what's changed and what is changing, because it seems like in the past few years we have had quite a few changes in election administration. So voting in North Carolina, there are 3 ways to vote. And I think that's really important to know. So we have absentee ballots by mail. This is not the same as all mail voting that some states have. So we do not just automatically mail ballots to every registered voter. The way it works, a voter or a voter's near relative or someone on their behalf requests a ballot. We mail them a ballot, they vote the ballot, and they mail it back to us or turn it in person. It sounds simple, but there are some rules around getting an absentee ballot. You have to use the state's absentee request form. You have to provide your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social. If it doesn't match what we have on our records, we can't send you a ballot. Once you get the ballot, you do have to mark your ballot in the presence of 2 witnesses or a notary public. And I think it's important, I always say this when I talk about the witnesses are not looking over your shoulder and seeing who you're voting for. That is still your private act of voting. You don't have to tell anybody who you're picking on your ballot. But they do need to be able to, if they're called to attest in a challenge hearing, if somebody said you didn't vote your ballot, the witnesses serve to say, no, I saw Jane Doe mark that ballot, I saw it go in the envelope, so I know that she marked it. So the notary public is also an option. The challenge there, when you go and have a notary notarize that they saw you vote your ballot, they actually have to see you vote your ballot. You can't just walk in with your already filled out ballot and ask the notary to notarize your envelope. They really are supposed to see you do that. And so if you're going to like a bank teller or wherever people find a notary, that might not be the most convenient, but it is an option. When you are returning the ballot, we give you extensive instructions. You can return it by mail. You can drop it off at any early voting location in your county, or you can bring it to your county board of elections office. Election day polling places cannot accept that absentee ballot. That always causes confusion. So election day locations cannot accept it. When is that ballot due at our office? 7:30 p.m. on election day. There is no extension. So if it's not in our office at 7:30 on election day, we cannot accept it. So we are ready on election night with a, atomic clock telling us when it's officially 7:30, and after that point, we'll take it. We're going to mark it late, and we're not going to be able to count it. Another way that you can cast a ballot in North Carolina is through early voting. This is a 17-day period that starts on the third Thursday before the election, and it ends on the Saturday before the election. There are some common themes across states, so Monday through Friday, any satellite locations, which are locations that are not the Board of Elections office, they have to be open 8 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. We can't change that. I will say I wish we could, because in Brunswick County, after about 6 o'clock, we're not seeing a lot of activity. People aren't coming out to vote, but we are open until 7:30 p.m. On the last Saturday, all locations in the state are open 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. Other than that, the county boards of elections get to set schedules for weekends, so Saturdays and Sundays. They can decide how many early voting locations they want to have. That really is up to the county board. Now, when the county board cannot agree on what that plan looks like, it then goes up to the state board of elections, and the state board of elections can adopt a plan for the county. In this current election, that's what happened with us. Our board was split on Sunday voting. It went up to the state, and the state said no Sundays. So that's kind of how those things work themselves out. I really like early voting for 2 reasons. A voter can go to any open location in their county. So someone that lives in Calabash could be driving up to Wilmington, and they could see the sign at the Leland Cultural Arts Center, pull in and cast their ballot. Any location in their county. In their county is important. You can't go to a New Hanover County location if you live in Brunswick. That will not work. Another thing is a voter who missed the voter registration deadline, which is 25 days before the election, can do a same-day registration at the early voting site. So they will be asked to provide proof of residency, which could be their driver's license if it has their current address on it. It could be a utility bill, bank statement. There's a whole list of things that are acceptable. They would provide that. They would complete a voter registration form. The precinct official would register them and issue them a ballot like any other voter. So they cast a ballot that goes into the machine that day. So that's also convenient, because if you show up on election day, of course, you can't register and vote the same day. On election day, there are a lot more stipulations for where a voter can go. You have to go to your home precinct. So that is the location that you are assigned based on your address. Now, occasionally a county board of elections has to move a precinct, right? A building gets torn down, or there's construction, or the water's gone out, or we've outgrown it. And voters don't always pay attention to the little postcard we send, to tell them that there's a new location. So one thing I just want to tell you all, because you are out talking to voters, the number one thing a voter can do to make sure they have a happy and successful experience voting is to check their voter registration before they go vote. Number one thing. So the State Board of Elections has a voter search tool, and it will pull up a voter's record. The voter can look at it to make sure they are registered at their current address. They can find their election day polling location, and they can also get a copy of their sample ballot that is specific to them in that election. Some elections, a county board might have 10 different sample ballots available on the website. So how does a voter know which one's theirs? Easiest thing to do, go to your voter record, print it. Voters can print those sample ballots, mark them up, take them with them to vote. I like to say election day is not a test. You don't have to remember all of the candidates you researched. You can take your notes in with you. They can be electronic notes, so you can bring in your phone and use notes on your phone. I will say you cannot use the phone for communication in the voting booth, nor can you take a photo in the voting booth, but you can use it to look at your notes. Election day, also polls are open 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. Very important both for early voting and election day. If you are in line at the time the location closes, you don't get turned away. Our precinct officials will come to the end of the line, and they'll make a list of everybody that was in line at 7:30, and those people will be permitted to vote. Voters in North Carolina will be asked to show photo identification when voting. So there are a few different ways that can work out. You go to the polling place, you get asked for your photo ID, and you realize, ah, shucks, I drove here without my license. Oops. It's at home. When that happens at the polling place, we don't turn you away. We do offer options for you. So if you don't have your ID or can't produce a photo ID, you can complete what's called an exception form. So you can provide information to the Board of Elections about why you don't have your ID. Maybe your purse got stolen. Maybe you went to the DMV and you only have the paper copy that they give you. You don't have the actual card yet. We can't accept the paper copy. That's not considered a full ID for our purposes. Any number of reasons why you can't produce the ID, you would fill out an exception form. Now, if you fill out an exception form, you will be voting a provisional ballot. So that means you're not getting a ballot that's going to go in the voting machine that day. It will actually be considered by the Board of Elections in the 3 days following Election Day. Same thing if you forgot your ID and you say, well, I can bring it to the Board of Elections. That's no problem. I don't know if any of you know where the Board of Elections is. It is in Bolivia. It's not in a place that people just end up. So it always, I wonder what kind of person goes, I'm going to drive to Bolivia and take my ID. That sounds like a really good idea. But that is an option. They could bring that to our office, but that is also considered a provisional ballot. So, exception forms, if the voter fills out an exception form, they fill it out properly, they sign it, they give us a reason, that provisional ballot is going to be counted unless our 5-member Board of Elections finds reason or thinks there is cause to believe that the form was falsely completed. That has never happened. I cannot think of a way that our 5-member board would look at a form and go, there's no way Jane Doe filled that out. But it could happen. It is an option in the law that that can happen. But we have not yet had to disqualify an exception form, a vote being counted based on an exception form being filled out. We have not counted ballots where a person says they're going to bring their ID to the Board of Elections, though, because they don't come. And if they don't come, we cannot accept that ballot. And with either of those situations and with provisional voting in general, I just like to make sure voters know that vote is not going to be in the election night results. That vote is going to be considered after Election Day by the board members. If someone cannot get a photo ID that would be acceptable for voting, or if they just want one, anyone can get a photo ID. Our office issues photo identification cards. They are really only for voting purposes. It even says so on the card, so I don't think you could use it for an ID to get a check cashed or anything like that. But we do issue those at our office. Basically, a voter fills out a form, we take their picture, we print a card. It's pretty simple. When you do absentee voting, there is also a photo ID requirement with an absentee ballot. So what we ask a voter to do is make a copy of their photo ID and include it in the absentee ballot packet that they're returning to us. How many of you have a printer at home? Wow, I did not expect to see so many hands. I do not have a printer at home. So if I were asked to make a copy of my photo ID, I would probably have to do it at work, because I have a printer there, or go to like a Kinko's or something and get the copy made. So most of the time when someone can't provide a copy of their photo ID, that's what they're saying on their exception form. They're saying, I don't have the means to make a copy of my photo ID. And that's okay. So an exception form with an absentee ballot is accepted as long as the voter filled it out correctly and provided the last 4 digits of their social or their driver's license number. And it matches our records. Then we can accept that absentee ballot. So that's a little nutshell about how elections work. And if you've been involved in elections in North Carolina for a few years, you probably know that there are quite a few things that are different. And when I think about the past few years, I'm thinking probably the last 2 years. Some of the new things that you might hear about, that you might not have heard about, so I just thought I'd talk about some of those. One of the big ones is the oversight and appointment of board members. So for a whole lot of years, I don't know how many years, but for many years, the governor of North Carolina appointed the county board chairs and the state board of elections. So that came from the governor. Well, now that is the North Carolina auditor. So the auditor is the person now that is appointing the county board chair and the state board of elections members. So that is different. The state board of elections and the county board of elections, they have 5 members. I believe probably every board in the state has 3 Republican members and 2 Democratic members, and that's because 2 members come from the Democratic Party, 2 members come from the Republican Party, and the chair comes from the auditor, who happens to be Republican. So I'm sure that he is appointing Republicans in every county. I don't know that for sure, but I would think. So the way it works, the auditor really does not have a role in the administration of elections. So the state auditor is not putting out guidance for us to run elections in North Carolina. That also comes from the State Board of Elections. So the State Board of Elections, they are the entity that interprets laws, puts out numbered memos, which are basically written guidelines for how county boards of elections do things. And then down to the county level, the county board of elections, so the board members basically oversee what me and my staff do. They make sure that we are doing things correctly, we're following the law, they select our early voting sites, they tell us what they want to see as far as precinct changes, anything like that usually comes from our county board. I'm very fortunate our county board works together phenomenally. Very rarely do I see any infighting, and really the only time I ever see my board disagree is when it comes to Sunday voting during early voting. So I guess that's not too bad when that's the only thing that they really get into disagreements about. So I talked a little bit about absentee voting. There have been a lot of changes with the deadlines and rules around absentee voting that if you're a voter that uses absentee by mail, these things are going to matter to you. Traditionally, you could request an absentee ballot up until the Tuesday before the election. So 1 week before election day. That's different now. It's 2 weeks before the election. It's a little different. It is a little different. I will say, just from, take it with a grain of salt, this is just what we're seeing. People that call after that 2-week deadline now usually have something going on. They have unexpectedly fallen ill. They are in the hospital, and they really have to have an absentee ballot. Well, there is an exception in the law for sickness or disability that we can continue to issue absentee ballots under those circumstances. But somebody has to physically come to our office, like a near relative. We can't just mail them out. So there is an exception to help people who absolutely need it because of physical disability or unexpected sickness. But for the most part, 2 weeks before the election, last day to request a ballot. Absentee ballots are due at the Board of Elections. I talked about that 7:30 p.m. election day. No exception. If you recall, maybe you've been involved in elections in North Carolina for a bit, we used to have what I call the mail exception deadline. So if you mailed your ballot on election day, it had a postmark on it of election day, and we received it 3 days later, that ballot was eligible to be counted. So we could count a ballot as long as it had a postmark election day, and we got it 3 days later. So that is a change. Now, I will say, to the benefit of the Postal Service, local post offices on election day actually drive ballots to our office to make sure that we get them by 7:30. So I know people like to knock the Postal Service, but they do a really good job trying to make sure that if they have a ballot in their office, they know the deadline and they are bringing it to our office. So I think I just wanted to share that. I think that's pretty good. Another change, the release of absentee results. With that mail exception deadline, we would have another meeting where we would consider absentee ballots that might have come in late. So we would, have multiple releases throughout the post-election process of absentee results. Not anymore. What happens now on election night, our board remains in a continuous meeting until they have considered all absentee ballots that have been received timely. I don't know what that's going to look like in a bigger election. In the last election, it didn't even impact our process really. We didn't have any really late arrivals. This election we might. But I think about presidential election absentee volume. We could be, meeting until midnight, 1 a.m., who knows? But I think that's important if you're one that watches results. When you're like, I'm so used to seeing something right at 7:30, where are those results? Well, we might still be meeting to count the ballots. So that is a little different. The only exception to that election night release of results is for military and overseas voters. They do have an extended deadline to mail their ballot because they're military or overseas. We also have a cure deadline, so I'll talk a little bit about what a cure is. So if you vote an absentee ballot and you send it to us and you forgot to sign it. How many times you forgot to sign something? I mean, it happens. What we do is we reach out to you. We call you, we send you an email if we have your email address, and we mail you a letter. All three things. And we say, we're going to need you to sign this piece of paper to have your absentee ballot counted. So that deadline does not stop election day because we may get the ballot in on election day. So those voters have until noon, 3 days later, to provide us with whatever we need to be able to count that absentee ballot. So there could be absentee ballots counted at a meeting on Friday only if they are in that cure category. I want to talk a little bit about some changes with same-day registration. So I talked about during early voting, this is one of my favorite things, is that a voter who missed the registration deadline can come in and we can actually register them and issue a ballot to them that they vote. It goes in the machine that day. I think that is a wonderful service because the average person is not thinking about elections 25 days ahead of time. They are thinking about it when they start seeing the signs on the road, when they see a vote here sign at their polling place. So same-day registration, we have had some changes to how we process those. Used to happen, we would process the registration form in the office, we would mail a card to the voter. If it was returned undeliverable, we would mail another card to the voter. And if that came back undeliverable, even if it were before canvass, we still could not do anything with that vote. That vote remained in the count. So we now have a change in the rules whereby same-day registration, we process the voter registration within 2 business days. We mail a voter card to the voter. If it comes back undeliverable, we're not mailing another card immediately. We enter into a cure process with that voter. So it seems like everything now has a cure process, which is good. It's giving the voter an opportunity to fix something. What that looks like is we call the voter. We say, hey, your mail bounced back. Did we get your address correct? Did we enter it correctly? We're checking our data entry. We're making sure that we didn't make a mistake. We're asking the voter to essentially consummate their address by providing us what we call a HAVA document, a Help America Vote document, which is something with a current name and a current address. So if a voter provides that to us, that cures the return mail, and we would be able to count that ballot and leave it in the count. However, if they cannot, if we can't get a hold of the voter, if they don't respond to us, if they don't get the documentation into us, on canvass day, which is 10 days after the election, we actually would pull that voter's ballot from the count. We would manually tally the choices on that ballot, and we would remove it from the total. We had some of those in the 2024 presidential election. It was a lot of work because, we say we had 1,000 voters at the Leland Cultural Arts Center on Thursday, and that's the day we have to dig through. We have to look through all of that paperwork to find the ballot with the right number on it. So if you voted early, we put a number on it. That's the only purpose of that number, is if we have to challenge a ballot to remove it, that's how we identify it. So that is new in the last few years. Oh, registration repair. Has everybody heard about registration repair? I want to talk a little bit about this because it is creating a lot of confusion with voters and particularly the most recent mailing that went out from the state. So I just want to clarify what the different buckets are for this effort by the state to get ID information on voters' records. So when I say ID information, I'm talking about driver's license number or the last 4 digits of a social. So we have a group of voters in the state who registered after the date when the Help America Vote Act said that voters had to provide a driver's license number or the last 4 digits of their social security number. So they registered after that date. I think the State Board of Elections form was misleading for some period of time. The county boards of elections were given directives that it was okay to process those for some time. So that's how that happened. You know, mistakes were made. These voters registered after it was required. So they did not provide the driver's license or the social security number. But by federal law, we have to have it. They have to give it to us. So what has happened with those voters is their records have been changed to inactive administratively, so they're not removed, inactive. When they go in to vote, they have to provide the precinct officials with that number. So the driver's license number or the last 4 digits of a social. They are casting a provisional ballot because the only way that provisional ballot can count is if we at the Board of Elections can verify that number through the DMV. So we're going to actually run that number through the system and see if we can get a match. If we get a match, it counts. And then they become active, and they never get asked for that information again. We had another category, and these were voters that registered after that Help America Vote Act requirement. They provided a number, but it didn't match. So we could not get a validation through the DMV or the Social Security Administration. Those voters became registered. They are still active registered voters. We are still asking those voters for the ID information when they come in to vote. So they don't have to vote a provisional ballot, they get a regular ballot. And we are asking for that information. They are not required to give it to us. And I think that's important to note. They are not required to give it to us. And then there's this third category where letters went out right before early voting started, which was, you know, everybody's getting these letters and wondering what we're trying to get from them and can they vote. These are voters that registered before there was a requirement to have a driver's license number or the last 4 digits of a social on your record. So they were never required to provide it. And the State Board of Elections sent a letter out asking for voters to provide this information because that is really a help to us for list maintenance purposes. If we have John Smith here and we get a registration in Watauga County for a John Smith, having a driver's license number or the last 4 digits of a social really helps us confirm that we can remove a record from here because they registered there. So it really is to make our data better, but it is creating a lot of confusion for those voters who say, I've been voting since the 1990s. Why are you asking me for this information now? They, again, are not required to provide it. They won't even be asked for it in the polling place. If they're in that category, there will be no pop-up. They might not even know. So they got the letter, but that would be the only way they know they're in that category. Okay, registration or fair. That's been a fun one. I've enjoyed registration or fair. Because I will note the first two categories, each county had to manually go through their list of voters in those categories to make sure that we didn't administratively leave a number out. And we had to rerun numbers if we had them to see if we could get a match. So it was a lot of work to try to not reach out to these voters or not inactivate records. So, yes?
Does that information stay within the state, or is that being passed on?
It is only within the state election management system. Mm-hmm. I want to touch on county board challenges. And this is something we've always done, but I do think that it is a little more of a formal process now. So if you vote early, or if you vote an absentee by mail ballot, your eligibility to vote in an election is actually determined on election day. So if I turn in an absentee ballot a month before the election, and then I'm convicted of a felony, I'm no longer eligible to vote in this election. If I go to early voting on the first day, and then 3 days before the election, I die, I'm no longer eligible to vote in this election. And so There's a process now where the state board does data checks, and they provide us with information about voters who may no longer be eligible to vote. We administratively enter a challenge to that voter's record. And we do go through the process where we provide notice to the voter, because what if it's a mistake? You know, we don't just automatically go in and pull a ballot out of the count. We do provide notice to the voter that's impacted, and if we don't get any objection from the voter, or they do not show up at the canvass meeting to say why it's not true, we remove those from the totals as well. Like I said, that's always happened, but it seems to be a lot more uniform now across all counties in the state, which is probably a good thing. You don't want one county doing this and another county not. That's all I have.
You can ask questions.
Yes, I think if anybody has questions, yes. Do we want to make sure, I can repeat the questions? Yeah, I can repeat the questions, yeah. Show it.
So I went to vote early voting,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you have to show your driver's license.
Yes.
But they insisted that I spell my name before I showed them my driver's license. Why are they doing that?
That is the way that our precinct officials have been trained, and it's because we want them to make sure they have the correct record in the system before they look at the license. Because if they look at the license and type something in off of that, what if you had a different last name? Or, you know, for consistency purposes, we want them to treat the voter record and check in just like we did before photo ID was a thing. Find the record, make sure they've got the right one, the address is correct, and then consider the photo identification. It's really just for consistency, to make sure that our precinct officials are doing what they're supposed to by making sure they have the right voter, and then making sure that photo ID and the person match the record that we found. Might not make the most sense, but for consistency, that's how we made it work. Yes?
When you move from a state, is the Board of Elections notified about that?
The question, when you move from a state, is the Board of Elections notified about that? Not automatically. So there is no federal voter registration database. There is no agreement with neighboring states where they share their information with us and we share ours with them. We really rely on the voter to notify the Board of Elections that they have moved. So we have a voter cancellation form here in North Carolina that when you move to Florida, you can tell us, I don't need to be registered there anymore, I've moved, and we can take you off. But we do rely on the voter to do that. Yes. Yes.
Can we still just use our license?
You can still just use your license for photo ID, as long as it's got your name substantially similar to, you know, you could say it's a different last name, you say you got married, no big deal. It also needs to not be expired or expired for less than a year, or if it's expired more than a year, it would need to have been valid on your 65th birthday.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
There's so much federal wanting to control over what's going to happen in elections. Really, this is a state-by-state control, right?
Yes. Currently, elections are...
Do you want to repeat the question?
The question was, there's so much federal talk about the federal government getting involved in the administration of elections. Right now, it really is state by state. There are some federal laws that really make sure each state is, you know, allowing everybody eligible to vote and things like that. Like we have the Help America Vote Act and Civil Rights Act put some protections in place. But right now, it is state by state. Yes. I'll get to you. Nancy, you've been raising your hand since the beginning.
Mine's a real easy one. In the primary, if you are registered as an independent, is there any way that you can vote in the primary?
That is a wonderful question. I can't believe I forgot to put that in my slideshow. So the question is, if you are independent, are you eligible to vote in the primary? So I will say in North Carolina, it's unaffiliated. Independent in some other states is actually a recognized party. So I always have to say that when somebody says independent. I know what you mean. So an unaffiliated voter is not affiliated with either of the parties, but when they go in to vote, they get to choose which party's primary they want to participate in. So they'll be asked at check-in, do you want the Democratic Party primary or the Republican Party primary? That does not change your voter registration, and it's only good for this primary, and if we have a second primary, you're bound by your party choice in the first primary. So if you choose Republican in the first primary and there's a second primary on the Democratic side, you can't flop. You have to stay with your initial party choice. Good question. Yes?
That North Carolina auditor that you were talking about, who chooses that person?
The voters.
The voters?
The voters chose him.
Did we?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he was on the ballot last year, I believe.
But when we voted, he wasn't the guy who decided who would be on the board of election.
No,
That's
no. Yes.
Oh, that's-
Yeah, so the auditor was selected by the voters, and I think at the time of his election, it had not been determined that he would be the one appointing the board members. I think that came after by court case. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I think that's an important omission.
Yes.
Is that going to be changed?
I could not begin to speculate what might happen with who appoints board members. That's changed a lot in my 20
But
years.
it's so advantageous.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
not in a good way.
Yes. Yeah, I'll start up front and then we'll go back. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but a couple years ago, my husband was in a rehab hospital so I went on his behalf to request an absentee ballot. I was in that office, completed the ballot on the day of the deadline. We never received a ballot in the mail. Do you have any idea what could have happened?
Well, that's a good question. So, requested a ballot on the last day, the ballot never showed up. I don't know how many years ago that was. Now we do have access to something called ballot tracks where we can kind of see where the last place the Postal Service touched a ballot. So we could say, okay, I saw it scanned at the sorting facility in Fayetteville, or I see it got to the local post office here, but it never moved anywhere else. So we can see a little bit more now, but I mean, there are times, like right now, I've got a student in Boston who has not received her ballot, and it was requested well over a month ago. You know, things happen. I can't say what those things are. Once it leaves our office, I really don't have a lot of control over that, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. I don't know what could have happened.
I just thought it might should be mentioned.
It should be mentioned that sometimes absentee ballots do not reach the voter, and sometimes the ballots returned by voters don't reach us. So take that, you know. Yeah. Yes.
So what ID do you need if you don't have a driver's license or social security when you're gonna go to the board? What ID do you need to present to get like a board ID?
So when you come to the office, the question was if you don't have the driver's license and you need to come to our office to get a photo ID, you're essentially filling out a form, requesting it, and you do provide your date of birth and the last 4 digits of your social.
That's what you need?
Yes, that's what goes on the form, but it's just a form. We don't need to see it.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks.
Say that. How concerned and when should we should start being concerned about the SAVE Act being passed, and when would it go into effect if it does get passed?
So I am going to be really frank with you. I started getting, educated about the SAVE Act about 6 or 8 months ago when it was really in the news, and I thought, okay, I'm going to understand what's going to happen, and then nothing happened. And then I also have to make sure that I can administer the laws we're currently dealing with. So I, in my role, am not really thinking about that, and I'm going to be quite honest, because with litigation and with the way things go, even if a law is passed, that doesn't necessarily mean it's coming down the pike to us. And I know that might not sound like the best answer, but I have to concentrate on what we have now in front of us and making sure that we can work with the rules we currently have. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I have to be quite honest. Yes.
Wouldn't that be too close to this upcoming election to really have?
For it to come down?
Yeah.
In my mind, yes, but sometimes those decision makers don't think about what goes into administering an election. Like, I don't know if you remember 2024, the very late change in a presidential nominee, we had to reprint ballots. They don't always think about what we're doing on the ground when they make decisions, so I really can't say that would know not to implement something that big going into a general election.
Sarah,
Yes.
when I first went to volunteer to be a poll worker, someone said, well, consider being a judge. I was at that time registered unaffiliated, and the parties, if I understand right, they controlled the election, and I could not be a judge. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. So the question is, when she first volunteered to be a poll worker, someone said you should consider being a judge, but she was registered unaffiliated, and so our chief judge and judge that run a polling place, those nominations come from the political parties. Some counties are their county parties are very strict, like we are going to have only Republicans and only Democrats. I have to be quite honest, here in Brunswick County, our parties, so the Democratic Party chair and the Republican Party chair, they actually work with us really well if we have recommendations of someone who should serve in a role like that. It doesn't mean they always go with our suggestion, but we do have unaffiliated chief judges and judges right now because they were nominated by one of the two parties. So it doesn't necessarily rule you out. The law just says that the nominations and recommendations have to come from the party, not that they be registered with the party.
Yes. Oh, what experience do you need to be a judge? Is there experience required?
So to be a judge is a little bit different than being a chief judge. So a judge is someone that we would normally identify as, they've done a specialty role for us. They've done the help desk, which learns how to do provisional ballots. They've learned maybe how to operate the voting equipment. So they've usually done something a little bit more than just an assistant. The judge, really the only thing different that a judge does other than an assistant is if there were a challenge to a photo ID in the polling place. So if someone was checking in and the check-in person said, I don't believe this is you, it goes to a situation where there's immediately a hearing by the chief judge and two judges. So that is one of the elevated things that a judge would have to do. A chief judge, on the other hand, in my opinion, that's a management role. That is not I can get in the weeds and I know everything about how to process a provisional ballot. I know everything about how to process the voting machine and close it out. That is more managing your workers, managing voter situations, and managing electioneers and observers and things like that. So I think chief judge is definitely like customer service and management. Yes. Yes.
Am I understanding correctly that North Carolina only recognizes two parties?
There are other parties. So we currently have the Libertarian Party. They did not have a primary election, so that's probably why it hasn't come up. And the Green Party, they also did not have a primary. Yes, so there are 4 right now. I think last year we were up to like 7.
And then I have a second.
Yes.
In traveling, I was told that I could have a copy of my passport on my phone in case my passport got stolen. If I had a picture of my driver's license on my phone, would that be recognized at the polls as photo ID?
No, it would not. No. Yeah, for photo ID at the polls, so she was talking about traveling and she was told she can have a photo or passport. We actually need to see the physical photo ID. Yes.
Time for one more question.
Joanne?
Did you just talk about voter fraud, prevalence or not prevalent?
I'm glad you said that because there was an article that came out not too long ago in the, about us being investigated, but we're not being investigated. I want to make that clear. So voter fraud is probably not as prevalent as some would want you to believe. I do think that there are sometimes irregularities or people that vote that shouldn't have been eligible to vote, but we have systems in place to catch that. So several years ago, we had a group of voters that we identified that were not eligible to vote. They cast ballots, but we discovered it too far after the canvass period, so we couldn't actually do anything about it in that way. We sent it to the State Board of Elections for investigation. They worked with the district attorney, and there were 8 indictments against those individuals. So while it was able to happen, it got through, there were repercussions for those individuals that voted that should not have voted. What was recently in the news that the State Board reported was being investigated was in various counties, different activities by people conducting voter registration drives. And I'm so lucky, they named Brunswick County as one of those, like 7 counties. And so then the news was calling and everything. So what that was about in Brunswick County was in 2024, we were noticing a pattern of voter registration forms coming in where the name would match an existing voter, but the date of birth was not right, or the driver's license number was different. And so we would not change the voter's registration. We would actually send them a letter and say, here's a copy of what you sent us, confirm your date of birth for us, or tell us what your ID number is. And the voter would call and say, I never filled out a form. And so anytime that happened, we were referring those to the State Board of Elections. So again, while something happened that probably shouldn't have happened, we discovered it, we sent it to the state. We don't have any investigative powers at the county level. That all has to go up to the state board, and that's what happened.
So Sarah, if the league does a voter drive and we collect forms, you will accept those?
Yes. Oh, yes, we will accept those. Yes. If anyone does a voter registration drive, so there's been no change in who can do a voter registration drive. So you can do a voter registration drive, turn the forms into us. Some of these, I don't quite know where they were coming from. I tried to figure it out. I know I'm not supposed to investigate, but I did try to figure it out. I could never quite figure out like where they were coming from or where they were getting the information, which is what made it a red flag for me. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for your time.
We are a full house, and so we had to turn people away. Kylie Schmidt is a UNCW student who is actually filming Sarah's presentation, and we'll have that on the website for those who were not able to attend. So thank you, Kylie, for that.